My brother broke my ribs. Mom whispered, "Don't say anything. He has a future." But my doctor didn't hesitate. She saw the bruises, looked at Timmy, and said, "You're safe now." Then she grabbed the phone. It was supposed to be just another family dinner, but that night, my own brother shattered more than just my ribs. He shattered my entire world. The physical pain was nothing compared to the gut-wrenching betrayal when my parents demanded my silence, choosing their precious family image over my broken body. But then, a doctor I'd never met stepped in, and her quiet refusal to be complicit changed absolutely everything. Growing up in Oak Ridge, Michigan, was never the picture-perfect childhood you see in commercials. Our small town, with its tight-knit community of under 15,000, was a place where everyone knew everyone else's business and appearances were everything. This obsession with external perfection seeped into the very foundation of my family's values, though it took me years to truly understand just how deeply. There were 4 of us: me, my older brother Kyle, and our parents, Thomas and Natalie Harris. To the outside world, we were the quintessential American family. My dad, a self-made real estate developer, was a local success story. My mom was always busy with charity work and social clubs, and our sprawling colonial house in the most prestigious neighborhood was testament to our standing. We went to church every Sunday, enjoyed family vacations twice a year, and our Christmas cards were elaborate, professionally shot portraits that my mother meticulously planned. But behind the closed doors of that beautiful house, our reality was starkly different, especially when it came to Kyle. Kyle is 3 years older than me, and from my earliest memories, he had what our parents lovingly called a bit of a temper. This bit of a temper meant that when we were kids, my toys often became casualties of his rage. I cherished a collection of porcelain dolls from my grandmother, and Kyle broke 3 of them during his various outbursts. Each time, my parents would simply replace the doll and tell me, "Stephanie, you just need to understand that your brother has strong emotions." As we got older, Kyle's aggression shifted from breaking my possessions to systematically chipping away at my spirit. He'd call me names, tell me I was stupid, or tear down my appearance. When I'd try to tell my parents, they'd just sigh, shake their heads, and dismiss it as siblings being siblings. My mother would pat my hand and say, "That's just how brothers and sisters interact, Stephanie. You need to develop thicker skin." It became painfully clear throughout our childhood that Kyle was the undisputed favorite. When I brought home straight A's, I'd get a simple, "Good job." But when Kyle, who was usually failing, managed to pull a B-, my parents would take us all out to the nicest restaurant in town to celebrate his achievement. My acceptance to the University of Michigan with a partial scholarship earned an approving nod. Kyle's acceptance to Michigan State, after my father made a sizable donation to their business school, was met with a massive party for the entire neighborhood. Despite all this, I poured myself into being the perfect daughter. I chose to pursue medicine, even though my true passion was art. My high school art teacher thought my watercolors were quite good and encouraged me to apply to art schools, but my father scoffed, calling it an expensive hobby, not a career. So, I packed away my paintbrushes and picked up textbooks instead. Our family's standing in the community was paramount to my parents. My father's business thrived on his reputation and connections. He was on the Chamber of Commerce board, sponsored Little League teams, and ensured his name appeared regularly in the local paper for his charitable contributions. My mother presided over the garden club and organized the annual charity gala for the Children's Hospital. We weren't just residents. We were pillars of Oak Ridge. The pressure to maintain this pristine image was constant and, honestly, suffocating. If I ever dared to complain about Kyle or express any negative emotions, my mother would quickly remind me, "We don't air our dirty laundry in public, Stephanie. People look up to the Harris family." My father was even more direct. "Your brother will take over the business someday. Nothing can tarnish his reputation." My feelings toward my family were a complex, agonizing tangle of love, resentment, duty, and a desperate longing for approval. I loved them because they were my family, but as I grew older, I started to recognize the sheer toxicity of our dynamic. Still, years of conditioning made it incredibly difficult to trust my own perceptions. Every time I felt mistreated, a voice in my head sounding suspiciously like my mother's would whisper that I was being too sensitive or selfish. After getting my medical degree, I did my residency in Chicago, which gifted me 2 blessed years away from Oak Ridge and my family. That distance provided so much clarity. With the help of a therapist, who I told my parents was just a stress management counselor, I slowly started to understand that my family's behavior wasn't normal or healthy. But then my residency ended, and an opportunity arose to join a medical practice back in Oak Ridge. Despite my deep misgivings, I took it. Financially, it made sense. The position offered loan forgiveness for my massive medical school debt. Emotionally, though, I was still chasing my family's approval, still harboring a sliver of hope that our relationships could somehow improve. When I moved back 3 months ago, the early warning signs that nothing had changed were everywhere. At my welcome home dinner, Kyle completely monopolized the conversation, boasting about his recent promotion at Dad's company. When I tried to share an interesting case from my residency, my mother immediately cut me off to ask if I'd met any suitable young men in Chicago. I saw these red flags, but I chose to ignore them, telling myself things would be different now that I was an adult with my own career. I was wrong. So very wrong. The evening that changed everything was supposed to be a celebration of Kyle's promotion to Vice President of Operations. My mother had spent days preparing, cooking all of Kyle's favorite foods and decorating the dining room with congratulatory banners. I arrived early, trying to help set the table and make the salad, hoping that by contributing, I'd feel more included. I'd even picked up a bottle of Kyle's favorite whiskey as a gift, stretching my budget that month just to try and make things perfect. I wanted this evening to go well. I wanted to believe we could finally be a normal, loving family now that we were all adults. The evening started pleasantly enough. My father uncorked an expensive bottle of wine, and my mother served her famous beef Wellington. Kyle seemed to be in good spirits, accepting compliments about his new role with his characteristic confidence, which always bordered on arrogance. He was already on his second glass of whiskey by the time we sat down to dinner, but that wasn't unusual for him. To Kyle, my father toasted, raising his glass. Following in my footsteps and exceeding even my expectations. Harris Development will be in good hands with you at the helm someday. We all clinked glasses, and I offered my own congratulations. The company's lucky to have you, Kyle. Your clients at the Riverside project seem really happy with your work. Kyle nodded appreciatively. Damn right they are. I turned that project around after Jackson nearly tanked it. The conversation flowed smoothly through the main course. My mother even asked about my new position at the medical practice, though her interest felt perfunctory. Kyle was already on his third whiskey when he started talking about his girlfriend, Megan, whom he'd been dating for about 6 months. We're talking about moving in together, he announced. Her lease is up next month, and it doesn't make sense to renew when she spends most nights at my place anyway. That's wonderful, dear, my mother said, though I noticed a slight tightening around her eyes. She'd always been traditional about couples living together before marriage. Megan's great, I said, genuinely meaning it. I'd met her a few times and found her intelligent and kind. She mentioned last time I saw her that she's hoping we'll come to her family's lake house this summer. Kyle's expression darkened slightly. When did you talk to Megan? We ran into each other at the grocery store last week, I explained. We chatted for a few minutes. She's really nice. What else did she say? Kyle's tone had a dangerous edge now. I shrugged, completely missing the sudden shift in his mood. Nothing much. She mentioned something about your dad's fishing boat needing repairs before you visit. She should keep her mouth shut about my family. Kyle snapped, cutting me off. The table fell silent. My mother looked down at her plate while my father cleared his throat uncomfortably. Kyle, I said carefully, she didn't say anything bad. She was just making conversation. Last month, she had the nerve to say, our family is intense, after Sunday dinner. Kyle's voice was rising. Like her family is so perfect with her alcoholic uncle and shoplifting sister. I'm sure she didn't mean anything by it, my mother interjected, clearly trying to defuse the situation, but Kyle wasn't listening. The alcohol had lowered his inhibitions, and he was fixating on a perceived criticism. And now she's talking about us to you behind my back. It wasn't like that at all, I protested. It was just friendly conversation, right? Kyle scoffed. Always so perfect, aren't you, Stephanie? The doctor, the good daughter, everyone's favorite. I almost laughed at the bitter irony of him calling me the favorite, but I knew better than to point out the obvious. Kyle, I think you're misunderstanding. Don't tell me what I understand. He slammed his glass down, sloshing whiskey onto the pristine white tablecloth. My mother flinched, but said nothing. My father finally spoke up. Son, let's dial it back. This is supposed to be a celebration. Kyle stood up abruptly, his chair scraping loudly against the hardwood floor. I need some air. He stormed out of the dining room towards the kitchen. After an uncomfortable silence, my mother suggested we move to dessert. I offered to help clear the plates, using it as an excuse to check on Kyle and hopefully smooth things over. I found him in the kitchen, pouring another generous helping of whiskey. Kyle, I'm sorry if I upset you, I said quietly, placing the stack of dinner plates on the counter. That wasn't my intention. He turned to face me, his eyes bloodshot. You always do this, acting all innocent while stirring up trouble. That's not fair, I protested. I was just making conversation about Megan. I like her. Well, keep your nose out of my relationship, he snapped. And stop trying to buddy up to my girlfriend to get dirt on me. That's not what happened at all. I said, my own frustration rising now. Why would I do that? Because you've always been jealous of me, he said, taking a step closer. Dad's company, Mom's attention, everything. You can't stand that I'm successful while you're still paying off student loans. His words stung, not because they were true, but because they were such a complete inversion of our family dynamic. It was so utterly absurd that I couldn't help but let out a small, disbelieving laugh. Are you serious right now? That laugh was the match to gasoline. Kyle's face contorted with pure, unadulterated rage. Don't you dare laugh at me. Before I could react, he shoved me hard. I stumbled backward, the small of my back hitting the sharp corner of the granite kitchen island. The impact knocked the wind out of me, and I felt a sickening crack in my ribcage. Pain exploded through my torso as I crumpled to the floor, gasping for breath. The commotion brought my parents running into the kitchen. My mother screamed when she saw me on the floor. My father froze in the doorway, his face a mask of shock. What happened? My mother demanded, looking between Kyle and me. She fell, Kyle said immediately, his voice too quick, too loud. She tripped. I couldn't speak through the searing pain. I could barely breathe. Each attempt to inhale sent jagged shards of agony through my chest. My mother knelt beside me. Stephanie, can you get up, honey? My father finally moved, pulling Kyle away. What did you do? I heard him hiss. Nothing. She's faking it. Kyle insisted, though the slight tremor in his voice betrayed that even he knew that wasn't true. With my mother's help, I managed to sit up, though the movement made me cry out. He pushed me, I finally gasped. I hit the counter. My mother's expression flickered between genuine concern and something else entirely, calculation. I'm sure it was an accident, she said soothingly. Kyle wouldn't deliberately hurt you. But he had. And it wasn't the first time, just the most serious. I think I need to go to the hospital, I managed to say between shallow breaths. It hurts to breathe. Let's not overreact, my father said, stepping forward. His voice was calm, almost patronizing. Take some ibuprofen and rest. If it's still bad tomorrow, we can reassess. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I'm a doctor, I told them, my voice strained. I know what broken ribs feel like. Please, I need to go now. I'll drive you, my mother offered, though her eyes were already scanning the kitchen for cleanup. I can drive myself, I said, not wanting to spend another minute in that house, not wanting to be in the care of people who would prioritize an image over my pain. Despite the excruciating pain, I needed to get away from them all. My father helped me to my feet, his face a mask of concern that didn't quite reach his eyes. These family disagreements happen, he said quietly. Let's not make more of this than it is. I didn't respond, focusing instead on breathing shallowly to minimize the pain. I gathered my purse and keys, refusing further assistance. As I carefully made my way to the door, I heard my father talking to Kyle in harsh whispers. The drive home was agonizing. Every bump in the road sent spasms of pain through my chest. I should have gone straight to the emergency room, but shock and denial pushed me to go home instead. I told myself I'd take some strong painkillers from my personal medical kit and see how I felt in the morning. A part of me still couldn't process what had happened, not just Kyle's violence, but my parents' chilling reaction to it. That night was one of the longest of my life. I couldn't lie down without excruciating pain, so I spent it propped up in a recliner, drifting in and out of uneasy sleep. By morning, the pain had not subsided, and my side was now sporting an angry purple bruise. I could barely move without gasping. I knew then that I couldn't ignore this. I needed medical attention, regardless of what my family wanted. The next morning brought not just physical pain, but the full emotional assault of my family's reaction. My phone started ringing at 7:30 a.m., my mother's ringtone. I let it go to voicemail, not ready to speak with her yet. 10 minutes later, she called again. This time, I answered. "Stephanie, how are you feeling this morning?" Her voice was light, casual, as if she were asking about a mild headache rather than potentially broken ribs. "Not good," I replied, my voice raspy. "Honestly, I'm in a lot of pain. I can barely move." "These things always feel worse the next day," she said dismissively. "Take some Advil and put ice on it." "Listen, about last night, Mom, I think my ribs are broken," I interrupted. "Kyle seriously hurt me." There was a pause on the other end of the line. When she spoke again, her voice had taken on that placating tone she used when she thought I was being difficult. "Sweetheart, it was an unfortunate incident, but let's not blow it out of proportion. Kyle feels terrible about it." "Has he said that? Has he called to apologize?" I asked, already knowing the answer. "He will, I'm sure. He was very upset last night after he left. But right now, we need to focus on moving past this. Your father and I think it's best if we just put this behind us." I shifted in my chair, wincing at the stab of pain. "Mom, I can't breathe without it hurting. This isn't something I can just put behind me. It's probably just bruised," she insisted. "If Kyle had really hurt you that badly, you would have gone to the hospital last night." The gaslighting was so blatant, it would have been laughable if it weren't so infuriating. "I'm going to get it checked out today," I told her firmly. "Stephanie." Her voice took on a warning tone. "I think it's best if we keep this within the family. There's no need to involve outsiders in what was clearly just a momentary loss of temper." "Outsiders?" "Mom, I'm talking about seeing a doctor for a medical injury." "You know what I mean," she said impatiently. "Questions will be asked. Forms will need to be filled out. Things get put on record." "Are you seriously asking me not to seek medical attention because it might reflect badly on Kyle?" I couldn't keep the incredulity from my voice. "I'm asking you to think about the consequences," she replied. "Your father's business depends on our reputation in this community. Kyle is positioned to take over eventually. A misunderstanding like this could have lasting repercussions." "A misunderstanding?" I echoed. "He shoved me into a counter and broke my ribs." "That's not a misunderstanding. That's assault." "Don't use that word," she hissed. "Your brother would never assault you. He had too much to drink, and there was an accident. These things happen in families, Stephanie." Before I could respond, I heard my father's voice in the background, asking for the phone. After a moment of muffled conversation, he came on the line. "Stephanie," he said, his business voice in full effect. "How are you feeling?" "Like Kyle broke my ribs," I replied bluntly. He sighed heavily. "Your mother tells me you're thinking of going to the doctor." "I think that's premature. Give it a day or two to see if it improves." "Dad, I am a doctor. I know what broken ribs feel like." "Then you also know there's not much they can do for ribs anyway," he countered. "They'll just tell you to rest and take pain medication, which you can do at home." He wasn't entirely wrong, but that wasn't the point. "I need an X-ray to make sure there's no displacement that could puncture a lung. And if you go in, what exactly are you planning to tell them about how this happened?" His tone made it clear this was the real issue. "The truth," I said simply. There was a long pause. "Stephanie, I want you to think very carefully about what you're doing. Kyle has worked incredibly hard to get where he is. His future at the company, his reputation in the community. These aren't things to jeopardize over a momentary lapse in judgment. So, his future matters, but my broken ribs don't?" Don't twist my words, he said sharply. Of course, I care about your health, but there are broader considerations here. Kyle made a mistake, yes, but he doesn't deserve to have his life ruined over it. The conversation continued in this vein for another 10 minutes. My father alternated between minimizing my injury and emphasizing the potential consequences for Kyle and the family's reputation. By the time we hung up, his message was crystal clear. My pain and health were secondary to protecting Kyle and the family image. Less than an hour later, my phone pinged with a text from my mother, sending a little something to help you feel better. Love you. By noon, a delivery person arrived with an elaborate gift basket containing pain relievers, a heating pad, luxury bath products, and my favorite chocolates. The card read, "Rest and recover. Family always comes first. Love, Mom and Dad." The gift felt like a bribe, a way to buy my silence. I set it aside, unable to even look at it without feeling sick. Throughout the day, the calls continued. My mother checked in hourly, each conversation circling back to keeping the incident in the family. My father called twice more, his approach becoming increasingly forceful, reminding me of family loyalty and perspective. Around 4 o'clock in the afternoon, Kyle finally called. I almost didn't answer, but a part of me wanted to hear what he had to say for himself. "Hey," he said, his voice uncharacteristically subdued. "Mom said I should call you." No apology, just an admission that he was calling because our mother told him to. "And?" I prompted. "And I guess things got out of hand last night," he continued reluctantly. "I had a lot to drink." "You broke my ribs, Kyle." "Come on." "I barely pushed you," he protested, instantly defensive. "You probably just bruised them when you fell." "I didn't fall. You shoved me into the counter." "Whatever. Look, I'm calling to smooth things over, okay? Mom and Dad are freaking out that you're going to make this into some big deal." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "It is a big deal. I'm seriously injured." "Yeah, well, we all have bad days," he said dismissively. "Remember when you crashed my car in high school? I didn't make that into a federal case." The comparison was so absurd, I couldn't even formulate a response. A teenage fender bender versus a grown man violently attacking his sister. These weren't remotely comparable. "Kyle, I have to go," I said finally. "I have a doctor's appointment." "Stephanie, don't be stupid," he snapped, his conciliatory tone vanishing. "You're going to regret it if you blow this up." Was that a threat? I hung up without responding, my hands shaking with a mixture of pain, anger, and disbelief. I called my friend Melanie, one of the few people from high school I'd stayed close with. She had moved back to Oak Ridge a few years ago after getting divorced and now worked as a teacher at our old school. When I told her what happened, her reaction was everything my family should have been. "Oh my God, Steph, that's terrible. Do you want me to take you to the hospital right now?" Her genuine concern brought tears to my eyes. "I have an appointment with a primary care doctor this afternoon," I told her, "a Dr. Hayes. She had an opening." "I'm coming with you," Melanie insisted. No arguments. "Text me the address and time." "You don't have to do that," I protested weakly, though a part of me desperately wanted the support. "Yes, I absolutely do," she said firmly. "And afterward, you're coming to stay with me. You shouldn't be alone right now." By the time my appointment rolled around, the pain had intensified to the point where even the prescription-strength ibuprofen I had wasn't touching it. Every breath was agony, and I developed a concerning shortness of breath. I knew I couldn't put this off any longer, regardless of my family's pressure. As Melanie drove me, my phone continued to light up with calls and texts from my parents. Each message carried the same theme: silence, discretion, family loyalty. But with each mile that took me closer to medical help, I felt a growing resolve. This wasn't right. And for once in my life, I wasn't going to prioritize my family's wishes over my own well-being. The medical office was housed in a modern building on the outskirts of Oak Ridge, far enough from the center of town that I was unlikely to run into anyone my parents knew. Melanie helped me from the car, supporting me as we slowly made our way inside. The receptionist looked concerned when she saw me wincing with each careful step. "Dr. Hayes will be with you shortly," she assured me after I'd filled out the intake forms, deliberately leaving blank the section asking how the injury occurred. True to the receptionist's word, I didn't wait long. Dr. Laura Hayes turned out to be a woman in her early 50s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. She reminded me a bit of my favorite professor from medical school, confident, direct, but with an underlying warmth that put patients at ease. "Dr. Harris," she said, extending her hand as she entered the examination room. "I've heard good things about you from Dr. Patterson at the clinic, though I'm sorry we're meeting under these circumstances." I tried to smile, but it came out as more of a grimace. "Please call me Stephanie, and thank you for fitting me in on short notice." "Of course," she nodded, glancing at my intake forms. "I see you're experiencing chest pain and difficulty breathing. Can you tell me what happened?" This was the moment I'd been dreading. A lifetime of conditioning to protect my family ward with my medical training and the simple human need to tell the truth. "I had an accident," I said vaguely. Dr. Hayes looked at me steadily. "What kind of accident?" "I was pushed and hit a counter," I said, the words coming out in a rush, "with my back right here." I indicated the area just below my shoulder blade. She nodded, making a note in my chart. "Who pushed you, Stephanie?" I hesitated, then looked down at my hands. "My brother." "I see," she said, her voice neutral but kind. "Let's take a look at the injury first, and then we can talk more about what happened." The physical examination was thorough but gentle. Dr. Hayes listened to my breathing, carefully palpated the injured area, and noted the extensive bruising that had developed. Her face remained professional, but I could see the concern in her eyes. "I'd like to get some x-rays," she said after completing the examination. "Based on your symptoms and the physical findings, I suspect you have at least 2 broken ribs, possibly 3. I'm also concerned about the shortness of breath, which could indicate a more serious complication." The X-ray confirmed her suspicions: 3 fractured ribs, one with a concerning displacement that explained my breathing difficulties. When Dr. Hayes returned to the examination room with the results, her expression was grave. "Stephanie," she said, sitting down across from me, "these are significant injuries. The displacement of your 7th rib could potentially cause a pneumothorax, a collapsed lung, if not properly monitored and treated. I'm going to prescribe appropriate pain medication and give you specific care instructions, but I need to ask you some more questions about how this happened." I nodded, a lump forming in my throat. "You said your brother pushed you," she continued gently. "Was this an accident during play, or was it deliberate?" "It was deliberate," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. "He was angry. He'd been drinking. Has anything like this happened before?" I thought about all the times Kyle had accidentally hurt me growing up, the shoves that were too hard to be playful, the arm grabs that left fingerprint bruises, the times he'd thrown things at me in anger. "Not this seriously," I said finally. "But yes, he has a history of being physical when he's angry." Dr. Hayes nodded, her expression compassionate but serious. "And how have your family members responded to this incident?" The dam broke. Perhaps it was the pain medication beginning to take effect, or the simple relief of finally talking to someone who seemed genuinely concerned. But I found myself telling Dr. Hayes everything: Kyle's attack, my parents' dismissive response, their relentless pressure to keep quiet, their prioritization of the family's reputation over my well-being. "They sent me a gift basket," I said with a hollow laugh that sent pain shooting through my chest. "Like chocolates and bath bombs could make up for broken ribs and the fact that they care more about how this affects Kyle than how it affects me." Dr. Hayes listened without interruption, occasionally making notes. When I finally fell silent, she put down her pen and looked at me directly. "Stephanie, as a medical professional, I want to be completely transparent with you about my obligations here. What you've described is a case of domestic violence, and in my position, I am a mandatory reporter." My heart sank. "What does that mean, exactly?" "It means that I am legally required to report incidents of suspected abuse to the appropriate authorities," she explained gently. "In this case, that would mean filing a report with the police." Panic flared in my chest, competing with the pain from my ribs. "No, you can't do that." "My family would," I trailed off, realizing how telling my immediate response was. Dr. Hayes prompted softly. "Be angry? Cut you off? Continue to prioritize your brother's reputation over your safety." Spelled out like that, It sounded so clear-cut, but decades of family dynamics aren't easily dismissed. You don't understand, I protested weakly. It's complicated. I understand better than you might think, Dr. Hayes said, surprising me. When I was in my 20s, my father broke my arm during an argument. My mother begged me to tell the doctors I fell down the stairs, and I did, because I didn't want to tear our family apart. Her candor caught me off guard. What happened? 2 years later, he put my mother in the hospital with a concussion and broken jaw, she said simply. I've spent the last 30 years wondering if I could have prevented that by speaking up the first time. Her words hit me like a physical blow. Was I enabling Kyle's behavior by staying silent? Would he escalate to hurting someone else in the future, perhaps Megan, or eventually his own children? I understand this is difficult, Dr. Hayes continued. Family loyalty is deeply ingrained, and the fear of consequences is real. But I want you to consider something. If one of your patients came to you with these exact injuries and this exact story, what would you advise them to do? I knew the answer immediately. As a doctor, I would urge them to report it, to prioritize their safety, to recognize the signs of an abusive relationship. But applying that standard to myself felt impossible. What exactly would happen? I asked finally. If I report it, Dr. Hayes explained the process clearly. A report would be filed, and the police would likely want to interview you. You would have the option to press charges against Kyle. Though the prosecutor could potentially proceed even without your cooperation based on the medical evidence, there would be documentation of the incident regardless. I'm not going to pretend this will be easy, she said. Honestly, based on what you've told me about your family, there will likely be significant pushback. But I also want you to know that there are resources available to help you through this process. I can connect you with a victim advocate who can explain your options and support you every step of the way. I sat in silence for a long moment, weighing my options. The thought of going against my family filled me with dread. But the alternative, pretending this never happened, allowing Kyle's behavior to go unchecked, sacrificing my own well-being for the family image, suddenly seemed untenable. Okay, I said finally, my voice steadier than I expected. Do what you need to do, doctor. Dr. Hayes reached out and gently squeezed my hand. For what it's worth, I think you're making the right decision. Not the easy one, but the right one. She spent the next 20 minutes outlining a treatment plan for my physical injuries, explaining the warning signs I should watch for, and scheduling a follow-up appointment. Before I left, she also provided contact information for a domestic violence counselor named Jessica and a support group for family abuse survivors. One last thing, Dr. Hayes said as I was preparing to leave. Do you have a safe place to stay? I'm concerned about potential retaliation once your family learns about the report. I nodded. My friend Melanie offered to let me stay with her for a few days. Good. Take her up on that offer, Dr. Hayes advised. And if you ever feel unsafe or need immediate medical attention, don't hesitate to go to the emergency room or call 911. As Melanie drove me to her house afterward, I felt a strange mixture of terror and relief. I had no idea what would happen next, but for the first time in my life, I had chosen my own well-being over my family's expectations. It was terrifying, but it also felt like the first breath of truly fresh air I'd taken in years. Painful, though, that breath was with my broken ribs. The repercussions began sooner than I expected. I had barely settled into Melanie's guest room when my phone exploded with notifications. The local police department had contacted my parents and Kyle for their side of the story, and they were livid. My father's voicemail was coldly furious. Stephanie, call me immediately. I cannot believe you would do this to your brother, to this family. We raised you better than this. My mother's message was tearful. How could you, Stephanie? After everything we've done for you, Kyle is devastated. The police came to his workplace. Do you have any idea what this could do to his career? To our standing in the community. Kyle's text was more direct. Thanks for nothing. Hope you're happy now that you've ruined everything. I turned off my phone, unable to deal with the barrage. Melanie brought me tea and sat with me while I cried, not from the physical pain, but from the emotional onslaught. How had I become the villain in this story? Why was I the one who had ruined everything when Kyle was the one who had committed violence? They're trying to make you doubt yourself, Melanie said wisely. Don't let them. You did the right thing. The next day brought more of the same. My phone continued to fill with messages from my immediate family, and now extended family members were chiming in too. My Aunt Susan, my father's sister, called to tell me I was tearing the family apart over a little disagreement. My cousin Patrick texted that I was being dramatic and attention-seeking. Even my grandmother, who had always been kind to me, left a voicemail asking why I couldn't have handled this within the family. Only my mother's younger sister, Barbara, sent a different message. I believe you, Stephanie. Call me if you need anything. Love you. I hadn't spoken to Aunt Barbara in years. She'd had a falling out with my mother over something that was never explained to me and had been largely absent from family gatherings ever since. Her support, though unexpected, was a tiny lifeline in the storm. I took a few days off from work, using my medical leave to recover physically and try to process everything emotionally. Dr. Hayes had connected me with Jessica, the domestic violence counselor, who called to check on me and provide resources. She explained that what I was experiencing, the family closing ranks, the victim blaming, the pressure to recant, was unfortunately common in cases of family violence. They're trying to maintain the status quo, Jessica explained. Your speaking up threatens the family system they've established, where your brother's behavior is excused and enabled. It's painful, but their reaction actually confirms that you made the right choice by breaking the silence. 5 days after my appointment with Dr. Hayes, I returned to my apartment briefly to pick up more clothes and some work files. I had just finished packing a bag when there was a loud knock at the door. I froze, instantly knowing who it was. Sure enough, when I peered through the peephole, I saw my parents standing in the hallway, grim-faced. I considered not answering, but I knew this confrontation was inevitable. Better to have it on my territory than theirs. I opened the door but didn't invite them in. We need to talk, my father said without preamble. I'm busy right now, I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. Too busy for your family? My mother asked, her voice sharp with hurt and anger. After what you've done, you owe us at least a conversation. I sighed and stepped back, allowing them to enter. They surveyed my half-packed suitcase with disapproval. Running away? My father asked. Taking care of myself, I corrected. What do you want? We want you to fix this mess you've created, he said bluntly. The police are talking about charging Kyle with assault. His job could be at risk. People are already talking. I didn't create this mess, I said, a spark of anger cutting through my anxiety. Kyle did when he broke my ribs. It was an accident, my mother insisted. He pushed you, yes, but he didn't mean for you to get hurt like that. He's 28 years old, Mom. He doesn't get to hide behind, he didn't mean it anymore. And it wasn't an accident. He deliberately shoved me because he was angry. My father stepped closer. His imposing height was meant to intimidate, as it had so many times in my childhood. Stephanie, you need to tell the police you want to drop this. Say you exaggerated, that you misunderstood what happened. I can't do that, I said, taking a step back. It would be lying. So, you'd rather destroy your brother's life over one mistake? My mother's voice broke with emotion. What kind of sister does that make you? What kind of brother breaks his sister's ribs and then calls her stupid for seeking medical help? I countered, my voice rising. What kind of parents care more about their son's reputation than their daughter's safety? My father's face darkened with anger. That's enough. We have always protected both of you. Everything we've done has been for this family. No, I said, the realization crystallizing as I spoke. Everything you've done has been for the family image. For Kyle. Never for me. That's not true, my mother protested. We put you through medical school. Because it looked good to have a doctor in the family, I shot back. Not because you cared about what I wanted. I wanted to study art, remember? You both laughed at the idea. My father dismissed this with a wave of his hand. This isn't about ancient history. This is about what you're doing right now, which is betraying your family. I'm not betraying anyone. I'm standing up for myself, maybe for the first time. The argument continued in circles, with my parents alternating between guilt-tripping, threatening, and occasionally attempting to cajole me into recanting my story. When it became clear I wouldn't budge, my father played his final card. If you go through with this, you're on your own, he said coldly. Financially, emotionally, in every way. Is that what you want? To lose your family over this? The threat should have terrified me. In many ways, it did. But underneath the fear was a strange sense of clarity. I lost my family the moment you chose to protect Kyle instead of me, I said quietly. Maybe I never really had one to begin with. My mother began to cry in earnest while my father's face turned to stone. You'll regret this, he said finally. When the dust settles and you've burned all your bridges, you'll realize what you've thrown away. After they left, I sat on my couch for a long time, trembling with the aftermath of adrenaline. I had stood my ground, but the cost was becoming increasingly clear. My phone pinged with a text from Kyle. Hope you're happy now that mom's hysterical. Dad says you're dead to him. Good job, sis. The harassment didn't stop there. Over the next few days, Kyle escalated his campaign against me. He posted vague but pointed comments on social media about family traitors and attention-seeking liars. He contacted mutual friends to give them his side of the story, painting me as unstable and vindictive. Most disturbingly, he began spreading rumors at the hospital where I worked, telling people I had fabricated the abuse allegations because I was jealous of his success. Some friends distanced themselves, uncomfortable with being drawn into family drama. Colleagues gave me strange looks in the hallway. Even Melanie, supportive as she was, seemed overwhelmed by the intensity of the situation. I had no idea your family would react like this, she admitted one evening. I mean, I knew they were kind of intense, but this is next level. I nodded, understanding her discomfort. You don't have to keep letting me stay here if it's too much. I can find somewhere else. Don't be ridiculous, she said firmly. I'm not abandoning you. I'm just saying it's a lot, but we'll get through it. Her loyalty meant everything to me, especially as others fell away. My circle was shrinking rapidly, and the pressure was intensifying from all sides. Work became increasingly stressful as I tried to maintain my professional demeanor while dealing with the whispers and the strain of Kyle's smear campaign. The final blow came in the form of an ultimatum delivered via my father's attorney. If I didn't recant my statement to the police and the medical report within 48 hours, my parents would 1. Cut off any remaining financial support, including the help they'd been providing with my student loan payments. 2. Remove me from the family trust, and 3. Publicly disown me as their daughter. The letter concluded with a reminder that they had always been generous and would welcome me back into the family if I came to my senses and fixed the damage I had done. Reading those cold, calculating words, I felt something shift inside me. The fog of doubt and guilt that had clouded my judgment began to clear. This wasn't love. It had never been love. Real families don't threaten and manipulate and enable abuse. Real families protect each other from harm, not inflict it. I sat at Melanie's kitchen table that night, the lawyer's letter spread out before me, and made a decision. I wasn't going to recant. I wasn't going to lie. For perhaps the first time in my life, I was going to stand firmly in my truth, whatever the consequences might be. The next morning, I called Jessica, the domestic violence counselor. I need help, I told her. My family is escalating their pressure, and I don't know what to do next. You're doing exactly the right thing by reaching out, she assured me. Let's talk about some practical steps to protect yourself and build a support system that doesn't include your biological family. That conversation became the first step in my journey toward true independence, not just financially, but emotionally and psychologically as well. It was terrifying to face the future without the family I'd always known. But as I would soon discover, it was also the beginning of a profound liberation. 2 weeks after my appointment with Dr. Hayes, I returned for a follow-up. The physical healing had begun. The pain was more manageable, and my breathing had improved. But emotionally, I was still raw and vulnerable. How are you holding up? Dr. Hayes asked after examining my ribs and confirming they were healing properly. Physically better, I admitted. The rest, it's complicated. She nodded understanding. Family trauma usually is. Have you been in touch with Jessica? Yes, she's been incredibly helpful. This was an understatement. Jessica had become my lifeline, helping me navigate not just the legal aspects of my situation, but also the emotional minefield of family estrangement. She suggested I join a support group for family abuse survivors. I went to my first meeting yesterday. That's excellent, Dr. Hayes said approvingly. How did it go? It was intense, but good. For the first time, I was in a room full of people who completely understood what I'm going through. No judgment, no questions about why I didn't just work it out with my family. Dr. Hayes smiled. That kind of validation can be incredibly healing. I still remember my first support group meeting after my own experience. It was like finally being able to breathe after holding my breath for years. Exactly. I agreed. One woman there, Alicia, had a similar experience with her older sister. Her parents also chose the abuser over her. Hearing her story made me feel less alone, less crazy for standing my ground. You're definitely not crazy, Dr. Hayes assured me. What you're doing takes tremendous courage. Not many people have the strength to break generational patterns of abuse and enablement. Our conversation shifted to my physical recovery and plans for returning to work. Before I left, Dr. Hayes handed me a card. I don't normally do this with patients, but given the circumstances, I want you to have my personal cell number. If you ever need medical advice or just someone to talk to who understands, please don't hesitate to call. Her kindness brought tears to my eyes. Thank you for everything. I don't know what I would have done if I'd seen a different doctor that day. You would have found your way, she said confidently. You're stronger than you realize, Stephanie. With Jessica's guidance, I began building a support network outside my biological family. Melanie remained steadfast, offering not just her guest room, but her unwavering belief in me. Alicia from the support group became a true friend, our shared experiences creating an instant bond. And to my surprise, my Aunt Barbara reached out again. I've been wanting to reconnect with you for years, she told me when we met for coffee. Your mother made it difficult. After our falling out, she essentially blocked my access to you and Kyle. What was the falling out about? I asked, realizing I'd never known the real story. Barbara sighed. I confronted your father about his favoritism toward Kyle and the way they both enabled his behavior. This was after I saw Kyle push you at a family barbecue when you were about 14. You fell and scraped your hands badly. Do you remember? I did remember. Kyle had been angry because I'd beaten him at a lawn game in front of his friends. My parents had laughed it off as siblings being competitive. Your mother accused me of trying to cause trouble in the family, Barbara continued. Said I was jealous because I didn't have children of my own. After that, I was gradually excluded from family events, but I always worried about you. Having Barbara back in my life was like discovering a piece of myself I hadn't known was missing. She was the family I needed, supportive, honest, protective in the ways my parents had never been. Alongside building these personal connections, I took practical steps to secure my independence. I changed the locks on my apartment, installed a security system, and set up cameras at the entrance. I consulted with a lawyer about the implications of being removed from the family trust and cut off financially. I opened new bank accounts at a different bank than the one my family used. Small steps, but each one made me feel more secure, more in control of my own life. Jessica also connected me with resources to help understand the psychological patterns that had shaped my family dynamic. I devoured books on toxic family systems, narcissistic parents, and the psychology of scapegoating. The more I learned, the clearer my situation became. Kyle was the golden child, perpetually excused and elevated no matter his behavior. I was the scapegoat, expected to absorb blame and prioritize everyone else's needs above my own. This education was both painful and liberating. Painful to recognize how deeply dysfunctional my family was, but liberating to understand that it wasn't my fault. I hadn't caused the abuse by being too sensitive or difficult, as my parents had always implied. I hadn't imagined or exaggerated the mistreatment. It was real, and I had every right to protect myself from it. The most challenging aspect of this new knowledge was learning to set and maintain boundaries. My entire life had been built around accommodating my family's demands and expectations. Standing firm in the face of their pressure went against decades of conditioning. Think of boundary setting as a muscle, Jessica advised during one of our sessions. It's weak at first because you've never been allowed to use it, but each time you hold your ground, it gets stronger. I practiced small acts of boundary setting daily, not answering every call or text from my parents immediately, refusing to engage when they tried to guilt or manipulate me, correcting misinformation when mutual acquaintances repeated Kyle's version of events. Each tiny act of self-advocacy built my confidence for the bigger confrontations. The police investigation into the incident continued, with the prosecutor ultimately deciding to charge Kyle with domestic assault despite my parents' efforts to intervene. Kyle hired an expensive attorney and pleaded not guilty, setting the stage for a potential trial where I would have to testify against him. The prospect was terrifying, but I was determined to see it through. Through all of this, I was surprised to discover an unexpected sense of peace emerging alongside the turmoil. For so long, I had contorted myself to fit into my family's expectations, suppressing my own needs and perceptions to maintain harmony. Now, despite the external chaos, I was beginning to feel an internal alignment I had never experienced before. My thoughts, feelings, and actions were finally in congruence. I was living in my truth, painful though it was. My support group became a sanctuary where I could express my fears and doubts without judgment. During one particularly difficult session, after receiving a scathing email from my father, I broke down. Sometimes I wonder if it would have been easier to just stay silent, I admitted through tears, to just take the pain and keep the peace like I always have. Easier in the short term, maybe, Alicia said gently. But that kind of silence eats away at your soul. Trust me, I tried it for years. An older woman named Ruth nodded in agreement. I stayed silent about my brother's abuse for 40 years. By the time I finally spoke up, I'd lost myself so completely, I didn't know who I was anymore. You're doing the hard work now, but you're saving yourself decades of invisible pain. Their words stayed with me, a talisman against the doubt that still sometimes crept in during weak moments. I was doing the hard work now. I was breaking a cycle that could have continued for generations. I was choosing truth over comfortable lies, health over dysfunction, reality over illusion. 6 weeks after the incident, I felt strong enough to return to my own apartment full-time. Melanie helped me sage the space, a ritual cleansing she swore by, and we rearranged the furniture to create a fresh start. My parents' gift basket had long since been donated to a women's shelter, removing that symbol of their manipulative support. That night, alone in my own space for the first time since everything had happened, I took out my watercolors, unused since college, and began to paint. The image that emerged wasn't planned. A small bird with a broken wing, but surrounded by light, beginning to heal. As I lost myself in the creative process that had once been my passion, I felt something shifting, opening, releasing within me. I was not just surviving this ordeal. In some profound way, I was being transformed by it. 6 months passed, bringing changes I could never have anticipated. When I first sat in Dr. Hayes's examination room with broken ribs and a broken heart, the physical healing was complete. My ribs had mended without complications, leaving only the faintest ache during changes in weather to remind me of the injury. The emotional healing was an ongoing process, but one marked by remarkable progress. I had moved to a different neighborhood, a small but significant act of reclaiming my independence. My new apartment was brighter, with large windows that flooded the space with natural light and a spare bedroom I had converted into an art studio. Paintings in various stages of completion lined the walls, evidence of my rekindled passion for creating. Throughout these months, my family situation had evolved in painful but necessary ways. After multiple attempts at reconciliation on their terms, which always involved me recanting my exaggerated version of events and apologizing to Kyle, I had requested a meeting with clear conditions. It would take place on neutral ground, with a family counselor present, and with the understanding that I would not be gaslit or pressured to change my story. Surprisingly, they agreed. Perhaps they thought they could still convince me in person. Or maybe they were feeling the social consequences of our estrangement in a community where appearances mattered so much. The meeting took place at the counselor's office on a crisp fall afternoon. My parents arrived. Dressed immaculately, as if for church, their expressions a careful blend of concern and restraint. Kyle came separately, his usual confidence dimmed somewhat by the pending legal case against him, which had been delayed by procedural issues. The counselor, Dr. Morgan, established ground rules for our conversation. No interrupting, no name-calling, using I statements rather than accusations. My parents nodded agreeably, though I could sense their impatience with what they probably viewed as unnecessary formality. Stephanie, Dr. Morgan began. Would you like to start by sharing what you hope to achieve from today's meeting? I took a deep breath, centering myself as I had practiced. I want clarity and honesty about what happened and what happens next. I want acknowledgement of the harm that was done to me, both by Kyle's actions and by your response to them. And I want to establish boundaries for any future relationship we might have. My mother frowned slightly at the word boundaries, but remained silent. My father shifted in his seat, already uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. Thomas and Natalie, Dr. Morgan turned to my parents. What are your hopes for today? My father cleared his throat. We want our family back together. This division has gone on long enough. We want to put this unfortunate incident behind us and move forward. It wasn't an unfortunate incident, I said quietly, but firmly. It was assault. Kyle broke 3 of my ribs, and then you both pressured me to lie about my injuries and prioritize his reputation over my physical safety. Stephanie, you know that's not how it happened, my mother began, her voice taking on the placating tone I'd grown to recognize as the prelude to gaslighting. Actually, Mom, that is exactly how it happened, I countered. And this pattern of denying reality is precisely why we're sitting here today. Dr. Morgan gently redirected the conversation, asking each of us to express our feelings without disputing each other's experiences. What followed was 2 hours of painful but necessary truth-telling. My parents continued to minimize and deflect, though with less conviction than before. Kyle offered a superficial apology that focused more on the inconvenience the situation had caused him than on the harm he had inflicted. I'm sorry things got out of hand, he said, not quite meeting my eyes. I never meant for you to get seriously hurt, but you have to admit, going to the police was an extreme reaction. Was it? I asked, maintaining my composure despite the anger bubbling beneath the surface. If a stranger had broken my ribs, would reporting it be extreme? Why should you be held to a lower standard of behavior because we're related? He had no good answer for that. By the end of the session, it was clear that while my family was willing to have me back in their lives, they were not truly willing to acknowledge the dysfunction that had led to our estrangement. They wanted reconciliation without accountability, forgiveness without change. As we prepared to leave, my father made one final appeal. Stephanie, we miss you. Despite everything, we're still your family. No one will ever love you like we do. I looked at him for a long moment, seeing him clearly, perhaps for the first time. That's the problem, Dad. The way you love is conditional and harmful. I deserve better. We all do. Walking out of that office, I felt an unexpected lightness. I had faced my greatest fear, permanent estrangement from my family, and discovered it wasn't as terrifying as I had imagined. In fact, the prospect of continuing to accept their version of love now seemed far more frightening than building a life without them. In the months that followed, I maintained minimal contact with my parents through occasional texts and brief phone calls, always with strict boundaries in place. Kyle and I had no direct communication outside of necessary legal interactions. His case eventually ended in a plea deal, a misdemeanor charge with probation and mandatory anger management classes. It was less than he deserved, but more accountability than he'd ever faced before. Professionally, my life took unexpected turns. The courage I'd found in standing up to my family translated into greater confidence at work. I advocated more effectively for my patients, particularly those showing signs of abuse or neglect. My colleagues noticed the change, and I was offered a leadership position on a new community health initiative focused on domestic violence prevention and intervention. This work brought me into regular contact with Dr. Hayes, who became both mentor and friend. During one of our meetings to discuss the initiative, I finally found the words to express my gratitude. I wrote you a letter, I said, handing her an envelope, to thank you for what you did that day, for seeing what was happening and having the courage to do something about it. She accepted the letter with a warm smile. I was just doing my job, Stephanie. No, I shook my head. You did more than that. You showed me what true professional integrity looks like. You were willing to make a difficult choice because it was the right one, not the easy one. That's the kind of doctor I want to be. Our work together on the initiative became one of the most rewarding aspects of my professional life. We developed training programs for medical professionals to better recognize and respond to signs of abuse, created resources for patients, and built partnerships with local support services. Each person we helped felt like a small redemption of my own experience. My personal life flourished as well. The support group that had been my lifeline in the early days became a community where I both received and offered healing. Alicia and I started a monthly gathering for survivors to share art, poetry, and stories as part of their recovery process. Melanie remained my closest friend. Her loyalty during my darkest days cemented a bond that felt more like family than many blood relationships. And speaking of family, Aunt Barbara became a central figure in my life. Her home became my holiday destination, her wisdom a guide through the complex emotions of creating a new kind of family when the original one had failed. Through her, I connected with cousins I'd barely known growing up, discovering relationships untainted by the dynamics that had poisoned my immediate family. Most surprisingly, I began dating again after years of focusing exclusively on my career. Daniel, a kind and thoughtful architect I met through a community art class, showed me what healthy communication and respect looked like in a romantic relationship. Our connection developed slowly, built on friendship and mutual values rather than the desperate need for approval that had characterized my previous relationships. On the anniversary of my appointment with Dr. Hayes, I took myself on a solo retreat to a cabin by a lake. I brought my paints, my journal, and a stack of books, intending to reflect on the year's journey. Sitting on the dock at sunset, watching the light play across the water, I wrote in my journal, "A year ago today, I was broken in more ways than I knew. My ribs were fractured, but so was my sense of self, my understanding of love, my belief in my own perceptions. I thought speaking the truth would destroy me, that I couldn't survive without the family that had both shaped and distorted me. I was wrong. The truth didn't destroy me. It rebuilt me, stronger than before. I learned that real love doesn't demand silence about abuse. Real family, whether bound by blood or by choice, lifts you up rather than holding you down. Real strength isn't enduring mistreatment. It's having the courage to say no more. I don't know what the future holds. The relationship with my parents remains complicated and limited. Kyle and I may never reconcile. There are still days of grief and doubt. But for the first time in my life, I'm building a foundation based on truth rather than pretense. On authentic connection rather than obligation, on self-respect rather than self-sacrifice. That feels like victory. That feels like healing. That feels like home. As I sit here, wondering how many of you have faced similar crossroads in your own families, I feel a profound sense of gratitude. Have you ever had to choose between peace and truth, between family loyalty and self-preservation? If my experience has helped even one person feel less alone or more empowered to seek help, then sharing it has been truly worthwhile. Remember, sometimes the family we create is more healing than the one we were born into. Thank you for listening to my story. Take care.